Hey, what's happening, guys? It's Tyler from Valve News Network, and today I'm going to be talking about all the unused and cut chapters of Half-Life 2. Here we go. Now, to get things started, I'm going to talk about the original opening G-Man monologue. Originally, the G-Man monologue was to start with the G-Man on a large, grassy field talking to Freeman. Then, during his speech to Freeman, the G-Man talks about the Combine and the 7 Hours War. During this, the field becomes the wasteland destroyed from the war, and then suddenly Gordon finds himself on the train, which is longer than the Half-Life 1 train ride originally, and was supposed to have a combination of purposes. First, this train ride was to show off the graphical prowess of the new Source engine, and also it was to serve as an exposition for the current state of the plot. Gordon sees bull squids, headcrabs, and gargantuas attacking a train in the distance. Gordon also sees the large walls that guard City 17 from the outside wasteland, and after entering the walls, Gordon sees apartment buildings, where many citizens are struggling due to their life with the Combine. Gordon then meets Samuel, a cut character from Half-Life 2, who gives you a gas mask and promptly tells you about the 7 Hours War and the Combine invasion. Gordon then finally gets to the train station at this point. Now, the train station itself has changed a little bit over time, but roughly stayed the same. The original City 17, however, was at one point absolutely completely different. First of all, Gordon was supposed to see the industrial part of City 17, which took a lot of inspiration from New York, not Eastern European cities, and was substantially darker. Polluted air, factories everywhere, and Combine cremators patrolling the streets. The Combine factories were a large part of the cities, which is where the Combine would use children to build the cremators. Gordon would then also see the stenographer's chasm, where many citizens would be typing and being looked over by the Combine. Children would also be seen working with large pistons and very large machinery. The papers that the citizens were typing in the stenographer's cavern were also the same thing over and over again. Just a monotonous task to be able to keep the citizens busy. Gordon also saw the Vortigonts being used as a source of power by the Combine, and they were trapped in these large vats that just sucked the energy right out of the Vortigonts. Another cut chapter is the Manhack Arcade, also called the Entertainment District of City 17. Along with the Braincast and a Metro Cop station, Gordon discovers the Manhack Arcade, which is the citizens' main form of entertainment. In this arcade, the citizens play a video game where manhacks chase down people and kill them. The catch? The game is completely real and the citizens are real people. This entire concept was cut by the developers because even though it sounded good on paper, actually implementing this was not very fun in the game itself. Another very large cut chapter is the depot. But outside of Nova Prospekt, the short nighttime section that led up to the prison was once one of the longest sections of the game. Gordon was to explore many parts of the wasteland and eventually got to a place called the depot. The depot itself was an early version of Nova Prospekt, but larger and darker. The building was not only a prison, but a train station for all the wasteland and a quite cluttered environment. The depot is in the final game, but is only seen as brushwork in the background of one of the maps. The Air Exchange is, in my opinion, one of the best cut chapters. Gordon, after leaving the depot, was to visit this building called the Air Exchange, which was a large building that was in charge of making the air incredibly toxic. Gordon was to go through this entire building and its surroundings to get to the top and shut down the Air Exchange. Along the way, Gordon was to meet up with Vance and the conscripts, and the explosion of the Air Exchange was to signal the uprising, causing a rebellion in the streets. Some parts of this chapter were supposed to be puzzle-based, using large vents to blow Gordon to various parts of the map. At one point in the Air Exchange map, when Gordon reaches the top of the tower, there was supposed to be a very large, intense battle with Combine soldiers, and once Gordon was to explode the Air Exchange, he was supposed to jump out of a large glass window on the top of the Air Exchange into a large pool of water below while watching the building explode. All of this was cut, although many parts of it were being worked on and were very far in development as seen within the leaked files. And the only reason this chapter was cut was one, to change the game's length from 4 days to 3 days. The Borealis is another cut chapter, which is a Combine ship that was later taken over by the Resistance. It was to be boarded by Gordon en route to City 17 after the Air Exchange, and there Gordon was supposed to meet up with Odell. Gordon then discovers that the ship was taken over by the Combine and Stalkers after the Resistance took it over from the Combine. Gordon then had to escort Odell through the ship and get to the submarine at the other end of the ship and escape. This chapter was completely cut, even though being worked on for one of the longest times of any cut chapter. In the early version of the game, the Borealis was also supposed to be the start of Half-Life 2, where the G-Man was supposed to drop Gordon off in the Arctic, and he was supposed to make his way to the ship. A smaller, lesser-known cut chapter that doesn't have many leaked files about it is the Kraken base. And after Gordon escapes from the submarine with Odell, he arrives at the Kraken base, which was an underwater base run by Helena Mossman. And this was discovered to be overrun with stalkers due to Helena Mossman being a double agent. The whole base was to be flooded flooded, and Gordon was to fight the Stalkers and be rescued by the Resistance in an escape pod right at the last second before the whole base became flooded over. Now, after escaping Kraken Base, Gordon was supposed to be escorted to another cut chapter called Weather Control, which was a building used for draining Earth of most of its oxygen. All we know about this chapter is through a story fragment in Half-Life 2 Raising the Bar, and not a single map was actually leaked during the game's development. The majority of the story seen in the story fragment was to take place with Vance and Gordon fighting alongside rebel conscripts. During the fight, a large Combine dropship was to bring down what is referred to as a Combine mech, which was described to be almost a Combine super soldier. A C-130 helicopter comes and picks up Gordon sometime after the fight is won and the chapter ends. After Gordon was picked up by the C-130, it crashes into a building after being attacked by the Combine, leaving Alex injured and Gordon having to find Vance down on the streets below the skyscraper they crashed into. Gordon is then supposed to scale the skyscraper to street level. This building was to house at first a museum and then a hotel, but later became what was called a palace. Within this building are many different enemies and different types of areas Gordon must get through to get to the streets below. Many variations of this chapter were made, making this building go from a very dark, destroyed hotel to a very fancy, ornate palace. Once Gordon reaches the bottom, he sees the street wars raging below. And that was all the cut chapters that you can find anything about within the leaked files of Half-Life 2. Thanks for watching, guys. I have another channel that I'm working on really hard as well called Nintendo News Network, so if you ever want to see the same kind of videos I do here but about Nintendo games, go check out that channel. Link is in the description. Thank you for watching. I'm Tyler McVicker. This is Valve News Network.